So glad you guys are here. My name is Nicole Golden, and it has been a hot minute since I have been able to be on this stage. And this is going to sound egotistical, but I'm actually going to trick you, but just pretend I didn't say that. How many of you have missed me? Any of you? Wait, real quick, just show of hands. I need to see a show of hands for a reason. How many of you legit missed me? Okay, great. So here's what I need to do. There's a I want to serve card in front of you. I am over in CC Kids every single week. So if you've really missed me, and a lot of you said you did, I don't know if production, you guys took notes of who all raised their hands, but you can fill out that card and you can serve with me every other week next door. And not only will you serve with me, you'll get texts from me, encouraging messages from me, and you'll never have to miss me again. No, I'm just joking. I'm serious, but I'm kidding. But it's so good to be back. We are in part 3 of a series called Crash and Burn. And for those of you who have maybe missed a week, or maybe this is your first time here, welcome. I just want to catch you up with our main catchphrase that we've had this entire time. And I just got so excited to be out here, I forgot to say the one thing I wanted to say. So pause, let me come over here, and then we'll go back. And I promise you the whole service will not be this ADHD. I want to say a special hello, love you to the ladies who are here, that it was a really hard struggle to be here. I want to know that I'm acknowledging you and your pain. Some of you have walked through some really dark times, and some of you are still walking through those dark times, and Mother's Day is a pretty massive trigger, but you're still here, and I want to acknowledge that. Would you guys acknowledge that with me, please, and let them know that, I also want to acknowledge the grandparents that have stepped in as mom and dad, and then the men who have had to step in and are the mommies and moms. So I just want to acknowledge each one of you in case someone has not done that. I want to do that for you, all right? Awesome. Okay, now back. So our catchphrase for this whole series has been, I know a failure and a mess when I see one because I am one, right? So when you get that text or see that post, or you bump into that person, or that one annoying, lovely person makes that comment to you yet again, and something goes off in you, it's a reminder. Listen, I know a failure and mess when I see one because I am one. All of that same stuff is inside of me, right? And we come by it so honestly. Our parents, we love to blame stuff on our parents, right? Our parents were messes. Their parents were messes before them. It's been passed down. Now, we've gotten a lot better at dressing up the messes and hiding the messes and pretending they're not there until that awkward moment where you've worked so hard not to be your mom or your dad, and all of a sudden you're staring at them in the mirror, right? And so we have come by it honestly, and we get to the place where we realize that nobody is perfect, and there is a perfect that nobody is. Bryant has been talking about that the past 2 weeks. Nobody is perfect, and there's a perfect that nobody is. This perfect that nobody is Jesus. And so those of us that follow Jesus, we get super discouraged because we're like, man, we're never going to be able to be perfect. We're never going to be able to get it all right, right? And so what we end up doing is we end up dumbing this whole thing down to just trying not to get in trouble. And then when we do get in trouble, when we do screw up, asking forgiveness, and then trying hard not to get in trouble again. And then when we do get in trouble, asking forgiveness. And it just becomes this massive cycle. And we get stuck. I'm going to try hard not to mess up. Oh, I messed up. I'm going to get forgiveness. I'm going to try hard not to mess up. And it becomes all about us, right? Until we get stuck in this deadly cycle, it becomes all about us. And here's the good news, that Jesus loves us too much to leave us in that deadly cycle, right? He loves the failures and the messes of the world too much to leave us that way. In fact, he has more for us. John 10:10 says that he has come to give us an abundant life. And living in this cycle of being stuck, of screwing up, asking forgiveness, that's not the abundant life. The abundant life is when we start to follow Jesus out of our messes, and he makes us into someone or something that can make a lasting impact on the world. And so we're left with a choice. The choice is either we follow the rules and stay stuck. And some of you, that's where you've been living for most of your life, right? You're like, there's a perfect, nobody's perfect. So I'm going to do my best to follow 50 to 70% of the 10 Commandments, right? And then some of you are like, I'm not even going to try for 50 to 70%. I'm going to do 20%, which is I'm not going to steal or murder, right? And I'm doing pretty good with that. So you make the choice to continue to follow the rules and you stay stuck, or you make the choice to follow Jesus and become somebody or something. And the choice that you're going to make is going to be influenced on whether or not you believe that God is more concerned about who you are than what you do. And I don't know, maybe some of you have never heard that in church before. Maybe the only message you've ever gotten in church and from religious people is that God is concerned about what you do, the mistakes you've made, the right choices you've made, what you've become. But he's actually more concerned with who we are on the inside. And he wants a relationship with us. And so when we finally grasp that, that helps us get unstuck. And one of my favorite people in the scriptures is the Apostle Paul. If you didn't grow up in the church thing, his name was actually Saul. And Saul got this more than anybody because Saul was a massive murderer. After Jesus came, died on the cross, rose again, people started following him. It was called Followers of the Way. And Saul was a part of the religious sect, the Pharisees, who hated followers of the way. They wanted to snuff it out. It was threatening everything they held dear. And so they would send Paul out. Paul would go out and he would arrest people, put them in prison, and either those people would remain in prison for life or they would later be killed. So Paul was the reason that kids lost moms and dads, wives lost husbands. Saul was the reason that families were absolutely destroyed. And what I love is that God was not distracted by what he was doing. God was not distracted about the fact that this guy was out to destroy the way. God looked at Saul and was like, now there's somebody when they're sold out for a cause that can do some really good work, right? And so while Saul was on his way to arrest and kill more people, Jesus shows up and he's like, Saul, why are you doing this? Why are you working against me? Why don't you work with me? Let's do something together. And so God saw past what Saul was doing, saw who Saul could be, which was Paul, and then turned Paul from a murderer into the greatest church planner in all of history. And so if God can do that with a murderer, I promise you he can do that with us. And that's why I love these verses we're going to look at from Paul. Before we get there, I actually want to jump ahead. We're going to be in Philippians, but Paul talks in Philippians 2. He talks about initially trying to work through the mess of his background. Because here's the thing. Following Jesus is not about avoiding our messes. It's about engaging the messes starting with us. And in Philippians 2, Paul talks about that. He's like, listen, I have to actively, he said, forgetting what lies behind. I have to actively try to forget about the messes that I created in my past. And I have to press on, he says, present tense, towards the high calling of God on my life. I was a murderer. I was in the midst of a mess. In that moment on that road, God placed a high calling on my life, and it started in that moment. It didn't start once I got my act together. It didn't start once I could go back and apologize to everybody. It didn't start when I could write a whole dissertation explaining that my life was brand new. No, that high calling started in that moment. And the high calling required him to initially face his mess when Jesus asked him, why are you coming after me? And to literally face his mess when he started planning churches and had to start visiting the families and the people lives he had destroyed. And so Paul says, listen, we can actively forget and we can actively press on. And there is a high calling on our lives. And that high calling is to partner with God in the gospel. And so that's why he says in Philippians 1, he's writing to this church in Philippians, he says, I thank my God every time I remember you. In all of my prayers for you, I always pray with joy. Why? Because of your partnership with me in the gospel from the first day until now. Now, I want us to talk here for a second about this thing about the first day. I just mentioned it. So instantly for Paul on the road to Damascus, when God met him, he became a partner in the gospel. And then as he's talking to this Philippian church was a group of Gentile believers. They weren't Jewish. They didn't grow up knowing about the Torah and that God was going to send a Messiah. All this was new for them. And they were living smack dab in the middle of the Roman Empire. So like you think our culture is a disaster right now, theirs was probably even worse. And so Paul is writing to a group of messes. And he's like, listen, from the first day until now, you've been a partner with me. From the moment you accepted Jesus in the middle of your mess until now. And I think too often, especially the church has gotten this wrong. And I grew up in environments like this where we would tell people like, let's preach the gospel. Like the gospel can reach you in whatever mess you're in, right? But then once you accept Jesus, okay, now that's when the real work starts, because we really can't have you serve or identify until your life gets cleaned up, because otherwise you make us look bad. Did any of you grow up that way? And so people were super excited when you got saved and when you accepted Jesus as your Savior, but then when you actually wanted to participate in that and you wanted to get involved, they got super nervous, needed you to kind of clean up. And in that process of cleaning up, that's when all of the rules got placed on you, right? And you got discouraged, and so many of you walked away from that because you just couldn't keep up. It was too discouraging. And so what I love here is what Paul's saying. He's like, you have been a partner with me from the first day. What do I mean by partner? He says that you are engaging the messes around you by pointing them to Jesus. See, Paul is saying we need to engage while we're a mess in order to get out of the mess. Paul engaged while he was a mess. He immediately started getting involved in partnering with the gospel in order to get out of his mess. Then he's telling the Philippians, same thing. I want you to get involved in order to get out of your mess. Why? Because it takes your eyes off of yourself and starts to get your eyes focused on the people around you. And this is why I absolutely adore our church. I have been around churches my entire life. My dad was in the ministry. I grew up going from church to church to church. I can tell you right now, in my 40 years, yes, I'm 40. I turned 40 last week. Thank you. I feel like I'm an actual, real live adult now. In my 40 years, I have never seen a church like Centerpoint Church, where every single one of us is a mess, starting with me. Those of you that don't know, I have 3 mental illnesses: anxiety, depression, and borderline personality disorder. I currently take Lexapro. I am a mess. The people that lead worship on this stage, every single one of them is an absolute mess. The people next door taking care of your kids, they've been background checked, but they're messes. The people that held the door open for you, made your coffee, all of them, messes. Why? Because we're engaging in the mess to get out of the mess. We are understanding none of us get this right. None of us are perfect. So many of us have hit rock bottom, and we're like, hey, we met Jesus when we were at our absolute worst. We really want you to meet Jesus at your absolute worst. And wouldn't you rather that than someone standing on stage claiming they had it all together? How discouraging would that be? No, instead, we're all figuring this out together. That's why it's a community. That's why it's safe. That's why I absolutely love Centerpoint Church. But some of you might be sitting here and you're pushing back a little bit because you're like, wait a minute. I get Paul was a murderer, yada, 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 That was however, thousands of years ago. It's in the Bible, blah, blah. But you don't know my mess. You don't know the 20-year secret I've been hanging on to that would destroy my family, my reputation. You don't know the place that I came out of last night. You don't know the lies I've told this morning. You don't know the things that I've contemplated, tried, attempted, swallowed. You don't know. And I'm just not sure God's gonna meet me in my mess. That's why I love these next verses, because if anybody could say this, Paul could. He says this in verse 6, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you, he's gonna carry it out to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Paul was confident. And Paul was because Paul was seeing God do it in his own life. Paul was watching God turn his mess around. And that's what God is in the business of doing. He wants to do something in us so that he can work through us. Do you know how many people, Paul got the attention of so many people because here he is out here to kill everyone. And now all of a sudden he's preaching Jesus to everyone. And they had to have been scratching their heads a little bit after they got past the absolute terror, right? And then the anger and the bitterness. And there had to have been a slight I guess if someone like Paul is believing. Maybe there's something to this. And that's what our lives do for people. They become messages of hope to others. And here's what I want to tell you. It is a grueling process sometimes to come out of that mess. For those, some of you know my story, some of you don't, so I'm going to give you a quick bird's eye view. But for about 25 years, I worked really, really hard to follow all of the rules. I was raised to follow rules, to look good, to be perfect. In fact, I think by the time I was 18 years old, I'd had 2 babies named after me. That's the role model I was, okay? Do any of you have babies named after you? I have like 2 or 3. Anyways. Yeah, so I worked so hard. And when I was 25, I met Bryant, and that's when my wheels fell off. It's his fault. No. We got married, and as a lot of you married people know, marriage can uncover a lot of your wounds, right? And become probably one of the greatest triggers. And so I had massive abandonment complexes I didn't know I had. That's a part of BPD. And so shortly after we got married, my wheels fell off, and I had a mental, emotional, nervous breakdown. And it caught me out of nowhere. I had been raised that emotional, mental illness was a result of sin, either in your life or someone else's. I was raised to believe that therapists were quacks, that medication for all of that was basically unbiblical. And so here I am, like in the darkest spiral of my life, really questioning, like, God, are you even there? Like, this was before deconstruction was even cool, right? So I like to claim that I was like one of the first deconstructionalists and led the way, but trying to figure out, like, has everything I've ever been taught true? Is this all real? And I remember being face down in my bedroom and just telling God, basically, like, if you're there and you can hear me, we've got 2 options. You're going to kill me or I'm going to kill myself. So, like, whichever way you'd like to do this. Because at this point, being in this place, this is not worth it for me. And I remember absolutely hitting rock bottom. And it was literally in that moment that God spoke to me. And he said, and some of you know my story, right? Like, I love you. Like, right here, right now, you and this helpless little ball on the floor, not even sure you believe, like questioning your worth. I love you in this moment. And that changed my life. And so it was from that point on that I decided to fight like hell for my life and for my future. And so I got into twice-a-week therapy. We didn't have any money. We went into debt paying for therapy. And I just started working my butt off to get healthy, to get to a place where I could tell my story one day, because I felt so alone. Nobody was talking about this back then. And so for about 8 years, I worked my butt off. And in 2018, I shared my story for the very first time over at our old campus. It was called Shattered. And a couple months later, my brother took his life. And here's what I can tell you. Had I not had that moment where the storms took out my house that was built on sand. Do you remember that parable in Luke where Jesus talks about building your house on the sand and then the storms come and it wipes out the house because there was no foundation? That was me. I had built this beautiful outward looking house on the sand, all on my ability to keep the rules, and it all came crashing down. And God met me in that mess and helped me rebuild my life on a foundation of following him and having a relationship with him. And when the storms came again in 2019, when Eric chose to take his life, and then a couple months later when my mother-in-law passed away, I can tell you that the house stood then. Because God had done his work, and I had allowed him to rebuild the foundations of my life. But had I chosen in those 8 really hard years of getting healthy, of getting to a place where I could share my story, of getting to a place where I could start to see that I was following Jesus out of my mess, had I given up halfway through, those storms would have wiped me out again. And this is why this verse is so powerful. This is going to be up on the screen. When we pull away, when we lose confidence, we prove that we don't believe that God's going to pull through. And sometimes our healing comes really quick. Have you ever met those people that like they've been on the struggle bus, they've made a mess of their lives, and then somehow God comes in, cleans it up real quick, and they're like on their feet the next day, and it's like, what? You know? It's so aggravating, isn't it? Because for most of us, like my journey took about 8 years to even get my sea legs, and I'm still on the healing journey, right? Like Kevin's still on speed dial, that's my therapist. Like still on all of those things. I'm still working towards that. But if at any point I just decide to give up and pull away and not be confident that God's gonna finish what he started in my life, then I'm proving not only to myself, but to each one of you that I don't think God can do it. And here's something, you met my daughter, she was up on stage, and we are Bobsey twins. Fortunately or unfortunately, I love it. But that girl has struggled with an anxiety disorder for the past several years, and she would be fine with me sharing. She loves to talk about it. Do you know why? Because she goes to Center Point Church, and that's what we do. We talk about our mess, because then we're messages of hope. But if I were to give up on myself and to pull away, I'm proving to my 12-year-old that not only do I not think that God's got the ability to take care of me, but now I don't think he's got the ability, I don't have the confidence that he's gonna take care of you. And so those of you that are in the middle of your mess right now, thinking about walking away, thinking about giving up, here's what I want to challenge you with. Who's watching your life right now? Whose relationship with Jesus is hanging on by a thread depending on what you decide to do? Like if you walk away, your kid walks away. If you give up, your marriage dies. If you choose not to believe, your friend won't believe. Who's watching you? Who are you a messenger of hope for? That if you give up, that person gives up. That's weighty. That's heavy. And so this is why Paul says this. He says, and this is my prayer, that you stay out of trouble and keep your hands to yourself. Listen, well, thank you. But that's not actually what he said. You should, but that's not what he said. He said, this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight. I love that he says in depth, because those of us who have reached rock bottom, we know how deep God's love can go, right? If you've never hit rock bottom, you don't know how deep his love can go. Those of us who have hit rock bottom, we know how deep it goes. We've got insight into God's incredible grace and his forgiveness. That's why I don't always love to talk about Jesus with people who haven't hit rock bottom, because you don't really get it. Those of us who have been there, when Jesus has met us in that moment, it's pretty awesome. And we are then able to have love that abounds. Because Jesus' love abound for us, we spill that out onto other people, right? Our love abounds on other people because we know and we've experienced his deep love. And he continues, he said, so that you may be able to discern what is best, not by keeping a list of rules, but by figuring out what Bryant has been saying the past couple of weeks. What does love demand of me in that moment? And that you can be sincere. Here's what I want to tell you. The most authentic, vulnerable people you will ever meet are the ones who have hit rock bottom. The people that you interact with that drive you crazy because they're inauthentic and they're not vulnerable and they're not real, they haven't hit rock bottom. They're still hiding. They're still living in judgment. They're still trying to scurry away from the limelight. But those of us who have hit rock bottom, we don't have hidden motives, and then blameless for the day of Christ. Here's what I want to tell you. He's not talking about perfection here. He's talking about when we accept Jesus as our Savior, Jesus covers us with himself so that when God looks at you, he actually doesn't see your mess, he sees Jesus. That's it. And so that's why we can walk around blameless. And he says, I want you to be filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, through following him, to the glory and praise of God. And so here's what I want to leave you with today. That following Jesus out of your mess is not just primarily about doing what's right. It's not about getting it right. It's not about focusing on doing all the right things. That's a selfish, stuck mindset. Instead, it's about engaging while we're a mess in order to get out of the mess. And I'm so passionate about this because I remember initially, right after we started getting some of my diagnoses back in 2010, our marriage was hanging on by a thread. We did not know, Bryant and I, if our marriage was going to make it. And I remember, a lot of you know this, but he wrote a letter to the elders, a letter of resignation. And because we had both grown up in circles where, like, if you were struggling, that was it, right? And so he wrote a letter of resignation, and they refused to accept it. And we continued to engage in our mess, and that's what brought us out of our mess. And over the past couple of months, I've had several conversations with a lot of you, not a lot of you, a handful of you, where you've come to me and you're like, I don't know really what to do. Like, I'm currently serving, or I'm currently leading, or I'm currently involved in this or that, but I am really struggling. Like, my mess is kind of catching up to me, or a mess is just starting. And I think I need to take a step back for a little bit and just kind of focus on myself, kind of get myself to a place where I'm okay, and then I'll step back in and serve. And I want to shake you sometimes. Because that's the worst thing you can do. You do that and you're gonna get right back stuck in the middle of your mess. And you're gonna isolate yourself. And that's what the enemy wants. He wants you alone and stuck in your mess. He wants you focused on yourself. Research says, actually, when you're walking through a dark time, the best thing you can do is to engage. And so whether or not that's here or that's outside of here, I don't care, but you have to engage. When you are in the middle of your mess, you have to engage in order to get out of your mess. Why? Because you need to be around constant reminders of God's grace, love, and forgiveness. You need to be in a place where you can constantly be partnering in the gospel, where you can constantly be reminding yourself of everything Jesus did to get you and to be in relationship with you. And so that you can be surrounded by people who can say, hey, even when you've lost faith and lost confidence and you don't believe God's gonna finish what he started, I'm gonna believe that for you. And I'm gonna stand in your corner. Just like when Moses had to hold his arms up in the Old Testament in order to win a battle, and Aaron and some of the other guys came and held his arms up so they could win. You need people in your corner who can hold your arms up and say, we will have confidence that God's gonna finish it even if you don't. And so last week, Bryant talked about following Jesus out of your mess. Here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to follow him out of your mess and into loving others. Being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. Your prayer this week, Heavenly Father, complete the work you've begun in me. Complete the work you've begun in me, because my 8-year-old is watching. Because my 17-year-old is watching. Because my partner is watching. Because my unbelieving mom is watching. Because my angry father is watching. Because that 5-year-old in the small group I lead over in CC Kids, he's watching. Because that student I'm engaging with every Wednesday night, that middle school student, she's watching. Because the person that I held the door open for on their way in this morning, they're watching. Help me to believe that you're going to complete the work you've begun in me. And here's how I want to end. We ended first service this way, but there are some of you in here, and I know a good number of your stories, and you are hanging on by a thread, and you are struggling to believe that God's gonna finish what he started in you. And so in just a second, I'm gonna give you a second to get your courage. I'm gonna ask you to stand. And then after you've stood for a second, I'm gonna have those of us who have hit rock bottom and God has rebuilt our lives to stand with you, to remind you that we are in your corner holding your arms up. So if this morning you would say, I'm struggling to hang on, but I'm gonna stand this morning and I'm gonna make a public declaration to my church, thank you, and to God that I'm gonna hang on, I want you to stand right now. Love that. That takes so much courage. You are in such a safe place. Those of you who have hit rock bottom that would commit to holding up their arms and praying for them, would you stand with them, please? This is what I want you to see. Look around this place. You are not alone. Would you guys pray with me? Jesus, what an honor and a privilege it is to be a part of a church that is willing to admit that nobody is perfect. There's a perfect nobody is. But in the midst of our messes, we are going to follow you and engage the messes around us. That we want to be committed to being messengers of hope to a world that wonders if there is any. And God, for those that had the courage to stand this morning to say, I'm struggling, I'm about to give up, but I'm going to give this one more shot, and I'm going to do my best to believe that you're going to finish the work you started in me. For those who had the courage to stand, God, would you meet them in such a unique, special way this morning? And God, for those who stood that say, I have been at rock bottom, but I want to be a messenger of hope, and I want to support and stand around and love and lift up those that are struggling. God, give them eyes to see those that need an extra hug. Give them eyes to see those who need an encouraging word. And God, I just pray that as a church, we would be a beacon of light and hope, that we would take a proud stand and say, we know failure and messes because we are one, but we have followed Jesus out and are willing to engage. God, we love you. We're so thankful. In your name, amen.